Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
All right, welcome to Meet the Author. Today we are talking to Ed Chevrette. He's the author of this new book. It's called Wings of Fortune. It's a memoir of his flying days, so welcome.
Thank you.
Today, Ed started at the Loudon Airport up to the days of becoming corporate jet. A corporate jet pilot. And you literally start from the Loudon Airport to the old days, late 50s, to where you're practicing night landings with headlights of cars to becoming, all over North America, the biggest airport. So I guess the first question is, how did you become interested in flying? Because at the beginning of the book, you really have this sense of wonder and all that. So tell us how you got interested in flying and all that. And
well, I've always found airplanes intriguing. There's always something very intriguing about something that leaves the ground and comes back. And they've always fascinated me because I thought the airplane itself was a pretty interesting invention. And you figured the fact that, as human beings, we're not designed to leave the ground. And what we've done in 66 years from the Wright brothers' first flight to walking on the moon, we've done pretty good in something we aren't supposed to be in.
So in the beginning, you literally, I guess, you just show up did you just show up at the Loudon Airport and ask for? Well, before we start, we should ask. Tell us about the Loudon Airport, like where that was, and a little bit of history of that. Then maybe we can go into your.
Okay, Loudon Airport is a small airport up is in Loudon, actually, the Cohoes Loudon area. Its location was just off of Route 9, which was south of what's now the landfill.
Okay.
There's a industrial park up there off of Fonda Road. Where that industrial park is today, that's where Loudon Airport used to be.
Okay, and then, so you were 16, and this is 1959, and you, just went over and said...
No, a friend of mine had done some flying, and he says, why don't we go up to the airport someday, and you take your first lesson, and that's how it started.
Okay. Now, the one thing about your book that really makes it very enjoyable, we were talking about this earlier, it makes it very enjoyable. I'm surprised more people that write memoirs don't do this, but most memoirs are told in the past, and even very good ones. But the thing you've done here is you've written this book in the present tense, and it really adds, not just enjoyment, but it makes it very immediate, like you're really there. So it's really, why did you just want to write it in the present tense? Because it really adds to the book's pleasure, I guess you could say.
Thank you. The main reason I did that was I wanted to take the reader and put the reader in the cockpit with me. I wanted the reader to wear my shoes and see exactly what I was doing. Because I wanted to do is take you from your very first flying lesson up to where I was flying corporate jets. Because as you read the book, I'll start you out your first flying lesson. I'll take you through your first solo. You get a chance to fly an airplane on skis. We fly an airplane off of water. You fly twin-engine airplanes. You fly as an instructor. You even end up flying in a Learjet.
Okay. It does come through, and like I say, you do feel like you're there. It was really a good touch. But tell us about how you wrote it. You went back and forth, and then an editor.
When I first started to write, I was going back and forth between present tense and past tense. And after the first editing, we sat down, we discussed it. What are you trying to do? And I said, I want the reader to be in the cockpit with me. I don't want to say this is something I have done. I'd rather say this is something I am doing, because it gives more of a sort of a special effect, more of an intrigue to it. And as a result, we hemmed and hawed, went back and forth, and we decided, let's do it in the present tense, because it will make the book rather unique.
Oh, yeah, because like you actually say, I see this happening, yes. I feel this, Dave says to me, so it was a good way to do it. So let's see. So why don't you take us through the steps of getting a pilot's license in those days, the late 50s, which is obviously very different than now, because it sounds almost like anyone could just, you were the youngest person ever to get one in this area?
In this area.
Well, tell us about what it was like getting a pilot's license in 1959, say, as opposed to...
Well, first of all, I was very fortunate in that in those days, not many of us, especially at 16 years old, had the funds to learn how to fly, and you could actually get a job at a local airport.
Well, you say in here
Yep.
you did like every job
Yep.
around, and it sounds like you enjoyed it too. So.
Yes. And basically, you still start this. Today, there's still only 3 licenses: your student, your private, and your commercial licenses.
Okay.
But in those days, we actually, most of us flew fabric-covered airplanes.
I know you had a thing in here about the punch test, whether it should you literally you had a device that if it made a hole, you had to go rip it all apart.
Yeah.
And
We had to learn how to take care of the airplane, how to recover it. I mean, we had airplanes that we had a hand problem. They didn't have starters on them.
Well, it sounds like in those days too, because you had all these different jobs, you really learned everything about the machine, about the mechanics, the airport. It sounds like you got a good sense of everything, just about. Is that the same now, or?
No, it's a little different today. Today, it's a little bit more sterile conditions. And, you go to a professional authorized flight school or in the military. It's a lot different today than it was.
You were actually literally in a classroom.
Yes.
So in those days, the classroom was up there.
You had dirt underneath your fingernails.
Well, the one other thing that comes through too, and and I hate to keep saying the old days,
That's
but
okay. They were fun.
The camaraderie you have with the other pilots, the ground crew, the support, the people at other airports, like when you in the book, you go to Oneonta, you go to Great Barrier, hey, yeah, the camaraderie of everyone seemed, I don't want to say special, but it seemed like there was a real camaraderie there of, what would you say, flying people, or?
Yes, it was a camaraderie. It was a passion.
Yeah.
And you could feel it everywhere you went. It was.
But even everyone involved, like even the people who work at the airport,
sure.
they're always like sort of kidding each other, and it sounded like it was a different era, I guess you could say.
Much
different. You flew out of Loudon Airport. Now, you were telling me earlier, I did not know this either, but tell us about all these little airports in, say, the Capital District that you flew in and out of, and maybe some little things about each one. I know some of them aren't there anymore, but tell us about some of
Well, it was
those.
Loudon itself. We talked about that. There was a lot of small airports. Some of them that are still around is South Albany, which is down in Selkirk, New York, near the Selkirk train yards. It's now called Saratoga. It used to be called Ballston. In fact, it used to be, I believe, an old Army flying school, training center way back when. Schenectady's still there, obviously Albany. Post and Kill is still over there. Troy Air Park, or Troy Municipal Airport, which also was a flying field up until, I'd say, probably mid-50s, which is no longer there now. It's a housing development. Athens, New York, they had an airport which is no longer there. I'm just trying to see. Catskill is still there.
But what were most of these for? I mean, obviously they weren't for passenger, but what were kind of the things they were used for? Just people sightseeing?
Most of them were just, most of them started out as people had their own airplanes and just wanted a place to keep them.
Yeah.
And then from there they started doing sightseeing, and that spread over into flight instruction, and then they started doing charter flying, and
So
that's how Loudon started.
But a lot of these smaller ones were for people who just enjoyed flying, and you go up and fly around for a few hours, and
Or people who had their own airplanes.
So since I'm not a flyer, I guess I should ask this. You talked about the passion of flying. What is it about, like you were telling me your logbooks, how you have 11,000 hours of, what is it about being up there, and not just doing it, but what is it about it that is so attractive, I guess you could say?
Well, it's very hard to explain, even harder to resist. It's one of those things you can't answer for yourself until you've tried it.
Yeah.
It's very unique, and as I said, the airplane's quite an interesting invention. There's a lot of rewards. It's intriguing. There's a certain amount of chance that you take, but that's calculable.
Yeah. Well,
but the rewards, as I said before, are just money can't buy it.
Let's see. It's almost a feeling beyond
Yes.
to describe. I think of the guy that wrote The Little Prince, was it Saint Exupéry? He wrote a lot of books about flying.
Yes, he did.
the sense of wonder, and it was really. So have you ever read those? Have you?
Yes.
Would you is that sort of what
Yes.
he was getting at something in those books?
He did quite well in those books.
Well, one thing we were talking about this. I just mentioned that you have 11,000 hours. Tell us about the log book, what it is, what it's for, and then how you actually used it to write the book.
Well, basically, you keep your logbook that keeps track of your time, and what that does is it's used for experience, for meet your requirements for certain licenses, and also you have to keep current. You have to keep so many hours, fly so many hours over a certain period of time. And how I started to write the book, I had an idea for quite a while that maybe someday I might like to write something like that. And
well, you said it started as you want to write a book for your kids, right?
Yes.
More or less. Okay, and then it grew into this.
yeah, and how it started was I was doing some spring cleaning one day, and I pulled out the old flight bag, and I dusted off a stack of logbooks, and I said, "Today's the day," and that's how I started.
And you could literally see from your teenage years all your flights, basically.
Yes.
So that must be some kind of, I don't know, memory shot.
It is.
Or something.
It is. In fact, the signatures of my old flight instructors are still in there.
So, okay, so you went on. I mean, I know we're jumping all over the place.
That's okay.
So then you got your license, you went on, and so now we're in, say, the mid-'60s or so, and so why don't you continue with your story there?
Well, from there, I started instructing at Loudon Airport part-time, and then it turned into a full-time position. And until the airport closed, I believe it was in 1968, because the property was sold for the industrial park. Then I flew out of Post-and-Kill for about a year. And when I was over there, I did quite a bit of multi-engine flying, and we started doing a lot of heavy weather flying. We left there, went up to Round Lake Airport, where I was introduced to doing some float flying, which is very interesting.
What was that? Float flying? What is?
Flying seaplanes.
Oh, okay. To land on the.
Yeah.
Okay.
We had a small strip, plus we had a round lake, which actually is a round lake. And on takeoffs there, it was very simple, or very interesting rather, with a float plane, because you used to run the thing around in circles until we get it airborne. I mean, you had a round lake, you had all the room you wanted. Excuse me.
So how does one graduate from these kind of planes? You ended up flying corporate jets.
Yes.
What's the process of going from these little, you started in the 1946, was a Cub or something. How do you end up going from these little planes where you actually got to put a tire filled with rocks in the back to flying these jets, the Lear jets and all? What's the process
Well, it's
there?
actually just one step at a time. You just start flying with the Cub, and then you start flying something a little faster, a little bigger, and it just progresses until one day you're in something like a Learjet.
And I think you were saying, near the end I was reading, the jet you were in, the fuel weighed more than the first plane you flew in or something like that.
The Learjet used to burn 1,200 pounds of fuel an hour. That was the exact gross weight of the Cub.
Now, is the feeling or whatever, flying, you're going a lot faster, you're a lot higher, is it different than sort of being 3,000 feet and, sort of looking down over Round Lake and so, what's the difference, if you're up 40,000 feet, I think you say in here you can see the curve of the Earth at 40,000?
41,000 feet, you begin to see the
So is that
curvature
sort of
of the Earth.
it's like a different feeling or a different?
It is a different feeling. Usually the air is smoother up there.
Oh, so, okay, it's not.
And it's interesting is that, some of the differences is that instead of sitting at 3,000 feet, you're sitting 40,000 feet higher than that.
Okay.
Number one.
So I think you said you're even over the weather, you were saying. And
Yes. You fly over most of the weather.
Okay, so that must be better than, I think there was a story in here about your older days, the guy was like, he opened the window in this ice storm with a scraper like you'd have in your car, and he's reaching out. I'm thinking,
the big difference between flying, let's say, at lower altitudes and higher altitudes. At lower altitudes, you look up at the weather, and at jet, you look down.
Okay, so you're. I was speaking of that story with the ice thing. I don't want to make it.
That's okay.
Tell us about some of these sort of close calls, I guess you could say. Because it's kind of funny you're reaching out, but it really wasn't, because the story was you had to land in Flint, like an
Yeah.
emergency. I don't want to make light of the fact, but tell us about some of these either close calls or just sort of crazy things that you're like, I can't believe that happened. Or something.
And I still can't. That one particular night, and going into Flint, Michigan, the storm that we would expected to be on top of actually gained in intensity throughout the flight, to the point that we put more ice on the airplane than the airplane was designed to carry. And on that particular night, one thing we didn't have on that Aztec that night was a heated windshield. So actually, when we made the approach, everything was done on the instruments, and we weren't able to see anything except outside the side windows until after we get the airplane on the ground.
And it was just all iced up.
It was all iced up.
So this guy literally was trying to...
It was sort of a desperation, or to get something so we could see ahead of the windshield, but the instrument landing was actually made totally on instrument.
Now, what kind of plane was that?
That was an Aztec. It's a twin-engine, six-place airplane.
Okay. So you mentioned flying by instruments. One thing that in the book, you make a big point of talking about instrument flying and what's the other word? Is pilotage? Is that the
Pilotage.
pilotage and instrument? Tell us the difference about flying either both ways, and sometimes you got to trust the instrument, sometimes you got to trust what you see, and sort of the vice versa. And it must take a lot of. I mean, you must need 11,000 hours of experience to be able to.
It helps. But pilotage itself, basically, you have a chart and everything is done visually. You'll use your instruments as a backup. But when you start flying instruments, everything that you do is right on the instrument panel.
So all your decisions are based on what you're seeing.
Exactly right.
And in the book, you call the instrument panel the panel of experts, and then in one other part, you called it the panel of consultants.
Yes.
So all your decisions are on what you're seeing.
Exactly.
Okay, and that's instrument flying. And so are there times when whether you're in the small planes or the jets, you may go both? Is that the right?
You can use both as
Yeah.
a backup, but when you're flying strictly on instruments, it requires a higher degree of concentration, because one of the first things you have to overcome is vertigo, especially in your early stages when you're just starting to learn about it. But it's all a concentration, and everything has to be trusted in that instrument panel.
Okay, very good. So tell us, let's see, another thing you were involved in when you moved from Loudon to Post and Kill, again, jumping all over the place here, but there's a lot going on. You were involved with ROTC at RPI, and when was that, in like the late
This was
60s?
late 60s, early 70s, and then again later in the mid 70s.
And then people in ROTC at RPI, you could actually, they took flying lessons, is that what they?
Well, what the program was called a flight instructor program, and at that time they could take an applicant and give him some basic flying. In some cases, when they first started out, as much as 35 hours, and they'd watch. They would go through this before they go to Pensacola. If they graduated from here, and then they graduated onto the senior year in RPI, then they'd be eligible to go to Pensacola.
Okay.
So basically what it was is they'd spend the money with a private contractor to find out if the particular individual had an aptitude for flying.
Okay, now, when they do that, is it any work in the classroom, or it's all?
Yes, no, it's in the air, and I also taught in the classroom.
Now, when you started, though, I don't remember, there was nothing in the classroom, was there?
There was classrooms, but it was very sort of impromptu.
Well, if it sounds like the guys you worked with in the beginning here, it sounded like it would have been. They're all like these old gruff guys, like and always sort of kidding around and joking. And
Well, it did change.
It did, yeah. I mean, they weren't. It seemed like it was good natured. This is where I was.
It was
talking about the camaraderie there, and then you became an instructor for many years too, and then you trained dozens and dozens of. Yes.
Over Post and Kill, we had the flight school over there. We had the private commercial. We had instrument instructor. We had multi-engine airline transport pilot rating. Through the VA program, I wrote and taught all those curriculums.
So I think you were telling me some of your former students are commercial pilots.
Yes.
Fly for UPS, and do you hear from some of these?
Yes,
guys?
in fact, on a fairly regular basis, there's one gentleman who's flying out of I believe it's West Virginia. He's now captain for UPS 767 International.
I know UPS. I just was reading about. They have like their own little army of.
They're all over the world.
I know their planes, but so how many kinds of planes have you actually flown? I mean, it seems like when you go through the book, you're starting in this 1946, then you end up in these Lear jets that go in. How many kinds have you actually flown?
I've tried counting and never finished.
Oh, okay. So there's is there ever a time that you would fly a plane you never flew? I mean, or without going up with someone first, you wouldn't just.
Usually, there's a checkout period.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't just
No.
go to the next level and just go try it out. That's what I know.
It's not a good idea.
Okay. Well, anyway, tell us. I'm just trying to think of. What I want to ask you was the writing the book. I guess we should put a plug in for the library.
Okay, sure.
You wrote you wrote the book here in the library. We have computers. I don't know if people know this. We have a lot of computers that people can use, not just for the internet, but for typing. And I think I remember you've always been back there typing. I was wondering, all right.
Wondering what I was doing.
And then when you got the book, you came with the book one day and go, yeah, this is what I was doing back there. So you typed the book at the library, and then you went to we had a program here about self-publishing.
Yes.
So I guess some people watching might be interested in how to self-publish a book because a lot of people might want to write a book. Tell us about this self-publishing process and how that all kind of works, and maybe people can get their own book published.
Well, but after the first editor looked at the book, I ended up rewriting it about 6 or 7 times before it was where we wanted it. As far as actually getting the book published, there's a copyright you've got to get, and you've got to get your ISBN number for the book. Plus, you want to get someone who can publish or print it for you. So I ended up going through the Troy bookmakers.
Yeah, Troy bookmakers are becoming very. They're doing a good business over there because I think we have a lot of books in our library from them. But so tell us about this. You bring the manuscript over, and what's the next sort of
What
step?
they did was, after everything was proofed, I had everything on floppy disks, and it goes to a computer, and they make sure that they can read the format that I've got. Then the next step is they'll change the format to fit what they call a 250-page book, or in this case, a 300-page book, to that size, to paperback.
And that they can you were saying you print like 30 or 40 at a time?
Anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30
So
or
that's
40
good.
at a time.
It probably saves money to do it that way.
And through them, by the time the book first came out, I had ISBN number. And I don't know if a lot of people realize this or not, but the first 2 books that are printed go to the Library of Congress. It's also copyrighted. And we put 2 copies in 3 of their stores. One was the Book House in Stuyvesant Plaza, the other was Market Block Book House, and then the other one was over in Great Barrington, Massachusetts.
Okay, and you've said you've already sold about, 70 or 100 or so?
I'm guesstimating about 70.
Good. Well, that's good because I was telling you, self-publishing in some ways is good because you bypass the big companies, but the problem is getting it out there. And I was saying that the next step is, I guess, to get some reviews done. If you can get some reviews, so hopefully people watching this show, maybe they'll go out and buy one. But we'll have a copy in our library. But so I guess finally, what I can ask you is, how would you sum up this sort of this career, I guess you could say, you've had flying? I mean, you do it. It comes through in the book. It sounds like you really totally enjoyed it and got a lot out of it, and it sounds like you wouldn't have done anything else.
Well, not at the time.
And you were saying unfortunately, you can't fly commercially anymore because you have an eye with
Yes, I have an eye
glaucoma,
problem.
so that hinders you. But if you wanted to fly on your own, you still could do that. All right. Well, the book is available at Book House, Friar Tuck's, and the place in Troy. What's the name of it again?
That's a Market Block Book House.
Market Block Books.
Borders.
And Borders. And we'll have a copy in our library if people want to come in and check it out. And so Ed Chevrette, if you write another one, come back and see us. And
We will.
we really appreciate your stopping by today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right, well, my name is Joe Nash. Thanks for watching Meet the Author, and we will see you next time.